Hello, everyone. I invite you to listen to this story. On the third day, after signing the papers at the county clerk's office, my mother-in-law moved into our apartment, and I discovered the house belonged to her. What's more, she demanded that I cover all household expenses. I just smiled, uttered a single sentence, and left. The morning sun, on the third day after our wedding, streamed through the window frame. The flowers from our small celebration on the table hadn't wilted yet, but my heart was already chilled. Rude knocks on the door broke the silence, bringing with them the stench of deceit. Would home be a haven of peace or a long-prepared trap? On that morning of my third day as a married woman, I was still in a light sleep. The bedroom was silent. Only the soft hum of the air conditioning could be heard. I'm usually a creature of habit, but the last few days, busy with buying and decorating our new nest, had left me exhausted. John, the man I had just officially called my husband, slept beside me. Our wedding had been quite quick. We met through a mutual acquaintance. John seemed like a kind man, with a stable office job, always attentive and detail-oriented with me. I convinced myself that at my age, marrying someone who knew how to care for a family would be a good anchor. This condo, according to John, he had bought with his savings before the wedding. He told me that although it wasn't very large, it was enough for a young couple to build their happiness. Believing his words, I invested no small amount of effort and money to transform this place into an elegant living space. From the imported leather sofa that dominated the living room, the large curved screen television, to the exquisite hand-woven velvet rug. Everything was chosen and paid for by me. I am an independent woman, with my own architecture firm and some assets inherited from my maternal grandparents. However, I always maintained a discreet lifestyle. I didn't want John to feel inferior to his wife. So, in silence, I took charge of everything to build our home. Suddenly, a series of shrill sounds shattered the calm. It wasn't the polite chime of the doorbell, but an insistent banging of a hand against the wood, accompanied by a shrill voice coming from the hallway. John, open the door for your mother. Come on, hurry up. I woke with a start and frowned, looking at the clock. Only 6 a.m. John also jumped up, a bewildered expression quickly masked. He slipped on his slippers in a hurry and rushed to the entrance. I put on a silk robe over my pajamas and followed him. As the door swung open, a short, stout figure burst into the house, bringing with her a gust of air heavy with the smell of sweat and dust. It was Carol, my mother-in-law. She wore a worn-out brown housecoat and a scarf on her head. Behind her, two sweaty movers carried huge, bulky, stained checkered bags on their shoulders. Carol had no intention of taking off her muddy plastic sandals at the entrance. She walked straight in, digging her heels into the shiny tiled floor I had cleaned myself the night before, leaving a trail of dirty footprints. "Mom, why did you come without warning, so I could pick you up from the station?" John stammered, awkwardly taking the broken-handled suitcase from his mother's hands. "Warning for what? It's my house. I come when I please. I don't need to ask anyone for permission. You two, leave those bags right there in the middle of the living room. Put them down without fear. They're just some old junk from the town I brought to use. They won't break," Carol ordered the men loudly. The two men obeyed and advanced directly to the center of the room. They dropped the heavy bags with a dull thud precisely onto my expensive velvet rug. Thus, the dust that rose spread everywhere, reaching the elegant cream-colored leather sofa. I watched with pain as my prized possessions were mistreated, but I struggled to remain calm and approached to greet her politely. "Good morning, Carol. The trip must have been long and tiring. Go wash up, and I'll make you some coffee." Carol scrutinized me from head to toe, pausing her gaze on my silk pajamas, twisted her lips, and blurted out in a sharp, biting tone, typical of a severe matriarch, "A married woman still in bed at this hour?" In my day, by this time, I would have already lit the fire, prepared food for the animals, and filled 3 pitchers with water. City daughters-in-law live like queens. The sun is already high, and you're dragging yourselves out of bed with the house in disarray, not knowing how to clean, letting your husband do everything for you. I was frozen by those cruel words so early in the morning. The house was immaculate, everything in its place. Carol was deliberately lying to impose her authority. However, I know the customs and respect for elders. Although I disagreed, I shouldn't enter into a heated argument from the start. I maintained a composed attitude and spoke in a serene voice. I apologize, Carol. I left the house clean last night. This morning I was planning to get up to prepare breakfast for John before he went to work. I didn't expect you to arrive so early. Please rest, and I'll have the men put your things in a corner of the balcony so as not to stain the living room rug. Carol glared at me, hands on her hips. So you're saying my things are dirty? With these things, I raised John, turning him into the man he is today. Leave everything there, I'll organize it later. What's for the kitchen? What's not for a corner? From today onwards, I'm moving here to take care of the family's assets and both of you. Because if I leave you in charge, we'll be ruined in 2 days. I was stunned and turned to look at John. I felt a lump in my throat, but immediately regained my usual composure. Carol's sudden arrival and her announcement that she was moving in completely contradicted everything John had promised me before the wedding. I remained silent for a moment, taking a deep breath to dissipate the oppressive atmosphere around me. Since childhood, my grandparents had strictly educated me in life principles, in the virtues a woman should possess in a family. My grandfather, a professor, always valued respect and family hierarchy. I always believed that upon marrying, I would treat my husband's family with sincerity and love. I wasn't afraid of difficulties. I only desired a harmonious and peaceful marital life. However, the harsh reality unfolding before my eyes was completely opposite to my expectations. Carol, my mother-in-law from the rural town, instead of showing the simplicity and kindness one would expect, exhibited an arrogant and calculating attitude, determined to subjugate her daughter-in-law from the very first moment. I looked at the bags of old junk that occupied the center of the living room. One was torn, revealing a rusty iron skillet and a pile of blackened rags. The smell of damp objects that hadn't seen the sun in years hit my nose, eclipsing the delicate aroma of the diffuser I had turned on the night before. This place, where I had put so much care, from every painting on the wall to every vase of flowers, was being brutally desecrated. Carol's arrival was not a simple visit from a mother missing her son. It was, to all appearances, a meticulously planned invasion. John, at that moment, rushed to the bathroom and returned with a damp towel for his mother to wipe her hands. He fussed over serving her water, taking cookies from the cupboard, completely ignoring my inquisitive gaze. His evasion only increased my suspicions. A responsible man would never allow his wife to be in such an embarrassing situation. He should act as a bridge, explaining things clearly to both his mother and his wife. Instead, John merely obeyed Carol's every command in silence. Like a child, this showed that he already knew what was going to happen. Or worse, that he was complicit with his mother in setting this trap for me. I approached to clean the mud stains from the floor, trying to keep my mind clear. Everything that happens has a reason. I am not a dreamy teenager who gets intimidated and breaks down crying at the first injustice. Years of experience in the business world had forged in me a serene character in the face of adversity. I told myself I needed to carefully analyze Carol's true motive. Certainly, bringing that pile of old junk was just an excuse to get into the house and establish her authority as a mother-in-law. Her ultimate goal was probably financial control and manipulation of my life. Helen, where are you? Go to the kitchen and see what there is to eat and prepare me something. I was on the bus all night and I'm starving. Carol's shrill voice echoed from the living room again. Yes, Carol, just a moment. I'll prepare some toast with tomato and gourmet ham for our breakfast, I replied, slowly entering the kitchen. My mind began to connect the dots. My calm, at this moment, was my sharpest weapon. I wouldn't let anger make me make a mistake. I needed to clarify things with John about the promise of living alone. In the modern kitchen, with its elegant oak wood cabinets, I carefully sliced thin pieces of gourmet ham and prepared the bread. My movements, usually fluid, today felt heavy. The clinking of dishes mixed with John's and his mother's lively conversation in the living room. Carol asked John about his job, his salary this month, and then complained about the house design, calling it wasteful. That crystal chandelier on the ceiling surely cost several months' salary. What nonsense! With such a small apartment, A $10 fluorescent bulb would be more than enough light. Young people nowadays don't know how to handle money. They spend it as if it were nothing. John laughed uncomfortably. Don't exaggerate, Mom. Money is for enjoying life, isn't it? Now that you're here, let Helen take care of the food and cleaning. You just rest and get strong. Hearing my husband's words, I forced a bitter smile. After all, in the eyes of John and his family, I was nothing more than an unpaid luxury housekeeper, a person whose responsibility was to bear all domestic tasks so that his mother could live comfortably. They didn't see me as an equal life partner, but as a tool to serve their family's interests. I served breakfast at the table. Carol sat in the center, tapping the edge of her plate with her fork. This bread is bland. In the town, we have sourdough with olive oil and garlic. Now that's flavor. Well, never mind. I'll eat something to warm up. Both of you sit down. After eating, I have something important to discuss with the family. I sat opposite John. My gaze locked with his, firm, announcing the tense conversation that was to come. On the morning of our third day of marriage, the sky was beginning to clear, but inside this apartment, dark clouds of calculation and deception gathered densely. The silence at the breakfast table was so profound that Carol's noisy chewing could be heard. She ate quickly, picking the best pieces of ham and putting them on John's plate, urging him to eat more to have strength for work. The image of a mother serving her son, so heartwarming in traditional culture, in this context, acquired a completely different meaning. It was a clear demarcation of territories. Carol wanted to reaffirm her unique position in John's heart, pushing me aside and turning me into a stranger in the house that I had built with so much effort. Breakfast ended quickly. I collected the dishes and took them to the sink. The sound of running water couldn't drown out the whirlwind of thoughts in my mind. I dried my hands and returned to the living room, mentally preparing for the important matter my mother-in-law had announced. I sat in a single leather armchair, my hands clasped in my lap. Carol, after using a toothpick, took a sip of the tea I had prepared myself the night before. John sat beside her, hunched, casting furtive glances at me, which he quickly avoided. This man's cowardice was increasingly evident. Mom said she had something important to discuss. We're listening. I broke the tense silence with a calm tone of voice. Carol cleared her throat, straightened up in her seat, and began to speak loudly. First, as I said, from today I'm living here. You young people spend all day out working, the house empty and neglected, and the money you earn, you spend it in restaurants. This way, you'll soon fall into ruin. I am your mother. It's my responsibility to come and manage expenses and maintain order at home. I directed a sharp look at John and intervened to question him. John, before we decided to marry, you and I reached a very clear agreement. You promised me we would live alone to build our lives independently, avoiding the generational conflicts that arise from living with older relatives. Why is the situation now completely opposite to your promise? Explain it to me. John flinched. His shoulders trembled slightly. He lowered his head, nervously fiddling with the edge of his shirt. He swallowed hard, searching for words to justify himself, but they stumbled out of his mouth. Well, actually, I was planning to tell you later. Mom is alone in her town and gets bored. If she comes to live with us, the house will be livelier. As a daughter-in-law, you should be understanding and respectful of her. With Mom here taking care of the house, you'll have free time, won't you? I smiled disdainfully. A coward's words are always full of excuses. I don't accept such a cheap reason. Don't confuse the concepts. Being respectful to parents is a children's duty. I never shirked that responsibility, but the basis of respect in a marriage is keeping the promises we make to each other. You deceived me even before we signed the papers. You deliberately concealed that your mother would come to live here so that I would furnish this house without worries. That is an abuse of trust, not an act of filial piety. Hearing me corner John with such solid arguments, Carol jumped to her son's defense, banging her hand on the glass table, making the cups tremble. Watch your words. Who are you accusing of abuse of trust? John is my son. And for him to bring me to live with him so I can take care of him, it's the most normal and fair thing in the world. When a woman enters her husband's house, she must follow the rules of that house. Do you think that just because you earn a few pennies, You can stomp on your husband. I tell you, you don't call the shots in this house. My eyes narrowed. A suspicion began to form in my mind. What do you mean by that? This apartment is John's property, bought with his savings before the wedding. He said it would be our marital home. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars furnishing and decorating it. Why do you say I have no right to call the shots? Carol let out a burst of laughter, a laugh full of triumph and sarcasm. She reached into her worn purse, rummaged for a moment, and pulled out a paper with an official seal. She threw it onto the table, sliding it in my direction. Open your eyes wide and read carefully. In whose name is the deed to this apartment? The money to buy this birdcage came from the compensation for the family's land in my town and my life's savings. John was just the intermediary. This is my house, and I decide who lives in it and who I kick out. You're only here as a favor, so don't start lecturing me. Every word from Carol was a hammer blow against raw reality. I picked up the paper and examined it. Just as she said, the deed was in her name. A shiver ran down my spine. The truth revealed itself in all its crudeness. John had staged a perfect farce. He had painted an idyllic picture of our future home, presenting himself as an independent man with his own assets to attract me. Realizing my solid financial position, he took advantage of my feelings and my trust to extract money. All the high-end appliances and furniture in the house, from the central air conditioning, the large-capacity refrigerator, to the imported washer and dryer from Germany, had been paid for by me with my card. The total value exceeded $50,000. John had deliberately let me pay for all the expensive furnishings of a house over which neither he nor I had any ownership rights. I looked at John. His face was pale. He didn't dare to look me in the eyes. He had completely cowered, letting his mother be his shield. A feeling of disgust overwhelmed me. The man I had thought to entrust my life to was a professional swindler, disguised as a good and docile person. His family had set up a sophisticated trap, luring me to become their sponsor at a loss. Other women, perhaps from previous generations, might have chosen to swallow their tears for fear of the stigma of divorce, of what people would say. They would have endured, serving their mother-in-law and working tirelessly to maintain a family that was not their own, but not me. I am Helen, an economically independent woman with my own ideas. I know my own worth and will never allow anyone to trample on my self-esteem. So that's it. I gently placed the paper on the table, completely serene, without a tear or a hysterical cry. My calm seemed to disappoint Carol. She expected me to collapse, to beg her, or to break things to have an excuse to cause a scandal. John, you are a genius. The play you staged is impeccable. You use your mother's money to buy the house, and then you use my money to fill it. You calculated everything to the last penny. Your family has truly opened my eyes to a new definition of the word fraud. I emphasized each word. My voice was as sharp as a blade. John flinched and raised his head to stammer a defense. Helen, don't talk like that. A marriage is for life. The furniture you bought is for both of us to use, and if we have children, it will be for them. The house is my mother's, but when she's no longer here, it will pass into my name. We lose nothing. You don't have to be so calculating. I smirked. John's words revealed his extreme greed and shamelessness. He used the pretext of conjugal love and future children to legitimize his blatant appropriation of assets for life. Aren't you ashamed to say that? A marriage that begins with premeditated deception has no moral basis to stand on. I bought the furniture with the sweat of my brow. Why should I leave it for this family to use for free? You are completely mistaken. I'm not so stupid as to let you exploit me at your will. Seeing my reaction, Carol changed tactics, slumped onto the sofa, hitting her thighs, and began her victim act, mixing laments with threats. My God, let the whole neighborhood come see how this daughter-in-law disrespects her mother-in-law. You came into my house, benefited from my family, and now you want to wash your hands of it. This house is mine, but you lived in it. As a daughter-in-law, you have to be reasonable. I warn you, you are John's wife. Therefore, your money also belongs to this family. You have no right to take anything. A woman marries and owes loyalty to her husband's family, contributing to thank her in-laws. That's how things are in this country. Don't try to argue. Carol's antiquated, backward, and selfish ideas seemed ridiculous to me. She believed she had the power to think that our marriage certificate was a contract by which I sold myself to her family. She didn't know that in front of her was not an ignorant girl from a rural town, unfamiliar with the law, but a woman who knew the civil code and property law in detail. The house was Carol's own asset, acquired before the marriage. I bought the furniture with my credit card in my name, with all the invoices to prove it. The law protects those who have evidence, not the covetous who rely on invented rules. Your laws only apply in your small town's kitchen, Carol. Here we live under the Constitution and the laws of the state. Don't try to scare me with those futile ideas. Now that everything is clear, we don't need to keep pretending we like each other. I stood up with an air of firmness and authority. This conversation was going nowhere. It only confirmed the baseness of John and his mother. I wasn't going to waste any more time with people who didn't share my level of morality. The decision was already made in my head, quick and sharp as a clean cut. Facing a calculating mother-in-law and a pusillanimous husband in the first days of marriage is a hard blow for any woman. However, instead of sinking, the flame of my pride burned stronger than ever. My grandfather used to teach me that the most important thing in life is to maintain dignity. Before petty and opportunistic people, you should never show weakness so as not to give them satisfaction. I silently assessed the damage and planned my next move. I stared fixedly at Carol and then at John's cowardly face. If you've already calculated everything so meticulously, making it clear whose house this is, then everything is very simple. Keep your valuable property and enjoy it. Having said that, I turned and headed to the bedroom, leaving behind the perplexed and astonished looks of mother and son. I had barely taken a few steps when Carol's shrill voice sounded again behind me, with the triumphant air of someone who believes they have won. She thought my retreat to the bedroom was a sign of surrender, that of an obedient daughter-in-law who submits to her mother-in-law's authority. Stop right there. We haven't finished talking yet. Where do you think you're going? If we live under the same roof, there have to be rules. Every house has its rules, every family its customs. I stopped and turned slowly. Carol had pulled a yellowed, plastic-covered notebook and a worn pen from her satchel. She flipped through the wrinkled pages and, clearing her throat, read aloud the rules she herself had drafted with the aim of establishing a regime of open exploitation. I calculated everything very well. Since you live in my house and don't have to pay rent, it's your responsibility to cover all family expenses. Electricity, water, food, internet, detergent, shampoo, everything is on you. John works hard. From now on, I will keep all his salary to open a savings account as a fund for when you have children. You, as a wife, have your salary, so use it for family expenses. Don't be stingy with your husband's family, and not a single complaint. Understood? Carol spoke without stopping, as if her absurd words were an irrefutable truth. When she finished, she slammed the notebook shut and looked at me with menacing eyes, awaiting my submission. John remained seated like a statue, completely in agreement with his mother's unfair plan. The perfect synchronization between them was so ridiculous that I couldn't help but burst out laughing. My laughter echoed in the small room, cold and full of contempt. What are you laughing at? Do my rules seem funny to you? Or do you think that because I'm old, I'm senile and can't do math? Carol frowned. Annoyed by my unexpected reaction, I made a gesture with my hand, maintaining my smile, but my gaze had turned as icy as a sword. No, I'm not laughing at you being senile, Carol. I'm laughing because your family has an extraordinary talent for business. You are an exceptional investor. You invest in buying a house and then find a woman with money to marry your son. That woman voluntarily spends her own money on expensive furniture to decorate the house and, moreover, commits to paying all monthly expenses to support the entire in-law family. Meanwhile, your son doesn't spend a cent, and his salary goes straight into a savings account managed by you. This business model has extremely high profitability and zero risks. The brightest economists in the world should call you a master. My sarcastic words hit their mark. Carol's face turned red with anger. She jumped up, pointing a finger at me, her voice trembling with fury. You insolent daughter-in-law! How dare you mock your mother-in-law? What bad luck this family had to welcome you. Women today, studies go to their heads, and they want to trample on their husband's family. I'm telling you, you came into this house, and if you don't follow my rules, don't complain if I'm hard on you. John hurriedly stood up, made his mother sit down, and turned to me with a false expression of disapproval. Helen, are you going too far? Mom is an older person. You have to respect her. As for expenses, if we both have good incomes, helping my mother a little is no big deal. Why do you have to calculate every cent as if we were strangers? I looked him directly in the eyes and declared, word for word, John, you and your mother are the ones calculating every cent with me. I am your wife, not an ATM from which you can withdraw money without limit. If your family doesn't respect me and uses trickery to exploit me, I have no reason to stay here, playing the role of the good, foolish daughter-in-law who sacrifices herself to maintain her husband's family. Carol glared at me. What do you mean by that? Do you think you're going to rent an apartment? Dare to walk out that door and see how many days you last without your husband's family's support. Ungrateful. You don't know how lucky you are, and you want to seek your ruin. I smoothed my clothes, tossed my hair back with a gesture, and adopted the attitude of a queen in her own territory. Don't worry about my life, Carol. Coincidentally, I have a residence that my grandfather left me. I have always been discreet and don't like to show off my assets, because I believe that the most important thing in a marriage is sincere love. But if your family puts material things on the scale and calculates every last cent of expenses, then I cede this subsidized condo to you, so you can enjoy your kingdom. I'm moving to my estate to live more comfortably. Hearing the word estate, Carol and John were left speechless. Carol looked me up and down with skepticism and mockery. She made a dismissive gesture with her hand. What a grand delusion. Where are you going to get an estate from? If you had an estate, why would you get involved in this 600 square foot apartment? Poor, but with too much pride. You're lying to avoid paying expenses, aren't you? I'm not falling for those childish tricks. John also smiled dismissively, supporting his mother. Helen, don't let anger make you say nonsense. How could you have an estate? If there are problems, we talk in private. Apologize to Mom and go rest. We'll talk about the money later. They didn't believe anything I said. In their greedy and narrow minds, a young woman like me couldn't own such a valuable property. Their ignorance made me laugh even more. The action would be a more painful slap to their arrogance. Whether it's true or not, you'll see in a moment. Now I have to make a call. I took out my latest generation smartphone, looked up my contacts, and called Mr. Thompson, my family lawyer. I put the speaker on full volume so John and his mother could hear every word. Good morning, Mr. Thompson. I need you to draft an agreement for the separation of assets immediately. I want it on record that all the furniture and appliances in this apartment are my personal property, purchased with my money. I sent you all the invoices by email last week. Please send someone with the document to verify and sign it as soon as possible. Of course, Helen, I'll take care of it right away, and an assistant will be at your residence in less than 30 minutes. Is there any serious dispute? Nothing serious. I'm just preparing the transfer of my belongings to another location. Thank you. My firmness and professionalism had shattered their illusions. They were beginning to realize that my threats were not empty. However, Carol's stubbornness made her cling to her last vestige of authority. She stood up and blocked the door to my bedroom. Who did you call to deceive me? Where do you think you're taking your things? Everything that came into my house is my house's. You won't take a single plate. I gently pushed her hand away. My voice, loaded with authority, completely silenced her resistance. The law determines ownership with invoices, not with your words, Carol. If you want to obstruct me, call the police. I have no problem causing a scandal for the entire neighborhood to admire your family's morality. Having said that, I entered the bedroom and slammed the door shut. Outside, I heard Carol's agitated, furious breathing and John's murmurs. This war had barely begun, and I was going to show them that irritating an economically independent woman is a fatal mistake. Inside the bedroom, I didn't waste a second. I took a designer suitcase from the closet and calmly began to pack my clothes, cosmetics, and valuable personal items. I did it methodically and decisively. I stored my jewelry in a small, portable safe. In 20 minutes, everything that belonged to me was packed. I called the best moving company in the city and requested a professional dismantling team and 2 medium-sized trucks. When I came out into the living room with the heavy suitcase, the atmosphere remained tense. Carol's 3 bags of junk were still on the rug, now scattered across the floor to mark her territory. Dented pots and torn rags covered the floor. Carol was squatting in the middle of this mess. Seeing me, she stood up and snarled, "Where are you going with that suitcase? Do you think you're going to steal things from this house and run off with someone else? Let someone come see how my daughter-in-law plans to escape." I completely ignored her insults. I approached a cabinet next to the television. I opened a drawer and took out a set of keys. They were the electronic keys to my 3-story estate in the prestigious Silverwood Estates gated community. I deliberately tossed them onto the glass table, producing a metallic sound. The solid gold dragon-shaped keychain gleamed under the lamp, along with the magnetic card showing the logo of the most exclusive community in the area. "Look closely, Carol. These are the keys to my property. If you can't read the name of the community on the card, I'll read it for you. Estate 18, Silverwood Estates. Its value is several tens of times higher than this subsidized condo in your name. Do you really think I need to steal your family's meager possessions?" My words were like a bucket of cold water for Carol. She stared with wide eyes at the luxurious keys. Although from humble origins, the name Silverwood Estates was known to everyone in the metropolitan area. She stammered, unable to articulate a word. John, who had been silent until now, lunged for the keys to examine them. His face turned from pale to red with shame and shock. He realized his grave miscalculation. "Helen, is the estate true? Why did you hide it from me? A marriage should be based on honesty. Hiding your assets shows that you don't trust me." John tried to mask his humiliation by blaming me. I crossed my arms, staring fixedly at the despicable man I called my husband. "Hide it? I never hid it, John. I am simply discreet. In contrast, you lied to me about our home. You planned to use your mother's money to have a house and my money to furnish it. Your deliberate deception is 100 times more despicable than my discretion. We don't share the same moral values, so don't use the word marriage." At that moment, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. It was the assistant from the law firm with a thick folder. Soon after, 5 uniformed employees from the moving company appeared with all their tools. I invited them in. "Good afternoon, Helen. We have orders to dismantle and transport the furniture, according to this list. Confirm it for us to begin," said the supervisor, showing me a detailed list. I took it, signed it, and gave instructions. "Proceed with the dismantling of all electronic appliances, large appliances, and high-end furniture. Start with the leather sofa in the living room, the curved television, the sound equipment, the 4-door refrigerator, the washing machine, the dryer, the oven, the dishwasher, also all the beds and oak wood closets from the bedroom. Oh, and roll up the velvet rug under that lady's feet. Don't touch anything that looks cheap, dirty, or isn't on my purchase list. Be very careful. Everything is very expensive." The order was given, and the team dispersed throughout the house, working with impeccable professionalism. The noise of drills and tools filled the air. Carol, seeing those strangers dismantling the house, went crazy. She stood in front of the television, shouting, "What are you doing? Who gave you permission to touch my things? John, call the police to arrest these people. Helen, you insolent woman, what do you intend with this? This is my house, and I won't allow you to take anything." The moving supervisor, accustomed to these situations, calmly moved Carol aside. "Excuse me, ma'am. We are working under contract and authorization from Miss Helen. She has all the invoices proving ownership of these goods. If you obstruct our work, you are breaking the law. Please step aside. If something breaks, you won't be able to pay for it." I approached and took a stack of invoices with itemized sales tax from the lawyer's folder, throwing them onto the table. "Look closely, Carol. Invoice for the television, $3,500. Invoice for the Italian leather sofa, $5,000. Invoice for the refrigerator, $4,000. On all of them, the buyer and the payment account are me, Helen. The total exceeds $50,000. You say they are yours. Did you pay a single cent for them? The moving company is working legally. Keep screaming if you want. I have all the time in the world to watch your drama. Carol looked at the invoices, her face contorted. She knew she was wrong. The evidence was irrefutable. Unable to stop them with shouts, she resorted to the lowest tactic: playing the victim. She sat on the floor, crying loudly. My God, my daughter-in-law is mistreating me. She's taking advantage of having money to take everything and leave me in an empty house. John, are you stupid? Aren't you going to stop your wife? Are you going to let her strip us bare? John finally intervened with a pleading voice. Helen, please, if you do this, how will my mother and I live? At least leave the refrigerator and washing machine for us to use. Taking everything is too cruel. Can't we be a little considerate of each other? John's baseness sickened me. He felt no shame for his deception, only fear of losing the conveniences I provided. Cruel? You used a dirty trick to ensnare me and turn me into your source of income. Isn't that cruel? I bought these things with my own money. Why should I leave them to a bunch of swindlers? Don't dream. I'm taking everything, down to the last light bulb. If I bought it, I won't give it up. While I supervised, the employees finished dismantling the television and the sofa and took them to the elevator. Then, the rest of the appliances and furniture, the luxurious living room, was left bare, showing empty walls. The rug was rolled up and removed, leaving her sitting on the cold floor amidst a pile of bags and junk. By noon, the work was done. Yesterday's brand-new newlyweds apartment was today an empty, desolate shell, without the warmth of luxury furniture, without the light of the crystal chandelier, only marks on the walls and the stale air of Carol and her son's failure. I picked up my suitcase and headed to the door. Before leaving, I turned to look at John one last time with a cold smile. Go clean up your mess from now on. Live on your own means in your own house. I'll leave the rest in the hands of my lawyer. See you in court. The sound of the door closing cut forever the tie with the worst relationship of my life. I walked down the hallway, feeling light, as if a huge weight had been lifted off me. This total counteroffensive was just the beginning. As I stepped out of the elevator, I took a deep breath to free myself from the stale and calculating air of Carol and John's house. My luxury car waited for me in the garage. I sat behind the wheel, smelling the familiar aroma of leather and grapefruit essential oil. As I closed the door, it was as if I cut all ties with the false world John had built. In the rearview mirror, I imagined John in the middle of the empty apartment, in front of the bare walls, and his grumbling mother. He must have been in a panic, seeing that his golden goose had flown away. I started the engine and drove towards the highway, leading to the prestigious suburbs. In the midday bustle, my mind was strangely calm, without resentment or tears. My grandfather taught me that a strong woman is one who knows when to hold on and when to let go. Lost money can be recovered, but self-esteem must never be trampled upon. John thought a paper from the county clerk could bind me, but he underestimated the determination of an independent woman. The car glided down the highway. The tree-lined silhouette of Silverwood Estates appeared before me. It was the place my grandfather had built with his life savings. Before entering the gated community, a premonition told me there was something darker behind Carol and John's bravado. Their sudden appearance, the demand about John's salary and household expenses, seemed like a distraction to hide a bigger financial problem. I connected my phone to the car's system and called Sophia, my best friend since college, and now a branch manager at a bank. Hello, newlywed. You haven't even finished your honeymoon and you're already calling. Do you need investment advice? I went straight to the point. Sophia, I need you to check the joint account I opened with John last week and use your contacts to see if there have been any strange movements on the additional credit card I gave him these last 3 days. I need all the details. Sophia sensed the gravity in my voice. Where are you? You sound very tense. Did something happen with your marriage? I'm on my way to my estate in Silverwood Estates. I just emptied the apartment and left. John's mother showed up saying the house is hers. John deceived me, but I suspect there's something more with the money. Please check. Sophia began typing. 5 minutes later, Her voice sounded full of anger. Helen, listen to me calmly. It's worse than you think. Only $50 remain in the joint account. The $50,000 from your joint savings was withdrawn by John yesterday afternoon. I gripped the steering wheel without taking my eyes off the road. Where did the money go? He divided it into 3 transfers, in the name of Steve Garcia, his younger brother. And that's not all. The additional credit card with the $25,000 limit was used to the maximum in a cash advance, a way to get cash by paying high commissions. That money was also transferred to Steve's account. I just checked. John's brother is a known problem gambler in his hometown. He got involved in an online sports betting network and owes money to loan sharks. A shiver ran down my spine. All the pieces fit. I thought they were just greedy, but I had stepped into the den of professional swindlers. Their plan was perfect. John married me to access our money, while Carol staged a scandal so he would have an excuse not to contribute financially, dedicating all his resources to paying his brother's debts. Helen, are you listening to me? What are you going to do? Do you want me to call the police for misappropriation? I'm listening. Send me all the statements and proofs by email, with the bank's seal. If possible, don't call the police yet. He did it under the guise of a marriage, and they would treat the case as a civil dispute. I will give all the evidence to Mr. Thompson to sue him and recover my money. Thank you, Sophia. I owe you a huge one. Stay strong. If you need protection, I'll call bank security. I can handle this. They don't scare me. I hung up. The car entered the grounds of my estate. The fresh air of the garden calmed me. My anger had turned into an iron will to fight. I was not going to allow parasites to use my money to finance their vices. I would make John pay dearly for his deception. I climbed the marble steps and asked my housekeeper to prepare my favorite tea. I needed a clear head for the legal battle ahead. The estate was silent. The difference between this place and the suffocating apartment this morning was abysmal. I had been willing to give up this comfort for a simple life with John, but I gave my kindness to a pack of hungry wolves. In the evening, my phone began to vibrate nonstop. It was John. I let it ring. He called 10, 15, 20 times. His insistence showed his panic. On the 25th call, I answered on speaker. Helen, finally, I've been looking for you everywhere. I know I made a mistake. Where are you? I'll come pick you up, and we'll talk. His voice was hoarse and pleading, which only increased my contempt. You don't have to look for me. I'm at my house, the estate you laughed at. We no longer have a shared home, nor are we a marriage. Helen, don't be so cruel. I admit I was wrong about the house story. I was a coward, but my mother is older. She has antiquated ideas. Have a little compassion. She regretted it very much. She told me to call you, that tomorrow we'll go to the notary, and she'll put the deed in your name. Isn't that enough proof of good faith? Come back, please. His act was so clumsy that I burst out laughing. Put the deed in my name? Do you think I'm a little girl? I know perfectly well that apartment is a subsidized housing unit, purchased with government aid, which isn't fully paid off, and has restrictive covenants preventing its sale or transfer for several years. On what legal basis do you intend to add my name? On the other end, absolute silence. He didn't expect me to know the law. You're out of script too, so let me continue. Do you want to explain to me where the $50,000 from our joint account and the $25,000 from my credit card are? You transferred all that money to your problem gambler brother to pay his debts to the underworld. Did you think you could hide it? A noise was heard as if something had fallen. His breathing became agitated. Helen, how? How do you know? I know much more than you imagine. You staged the mother-in-law drama so I would leave angry, and thus you would have time to move the money. Your family saw me as a gold mine to save your brother. You made a mistake, John. I can be kind to decent people, but scum like you I crush without mercy. Helen, I beg you, have pity on me. The mobsters threatened to cut off Steve's hand. My mother begged me on her knees to save him. I'm his older brother. I couldn't let him die. Consider it a loan. I swear I'll work like a slave my whole life to pay you back the money. Don't leave us homeless. He began to cry inconsolably, using emotional blackmail. I felt no shred of pity. The path you chose is yours, not mine. You love your brother? That's your problem, but you don't have the right to use my money to play the hero. Working like a slave, with your meager salary, you wouldn't pay it back even in the next life. Listen carefully, John. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., appear in court. I will file for a unilateral divorce. My lawyer will file a civil action to recover the money and a criminal complaint for misappropriation and fraud. I have all the bank statements. If you don't come, the judgment will be held in your absence, and I will send the evidence to the police to deal with you and your brother. Take care. I hung up before he could say anything else and blocked his number. A long and stormy day had ended. The tea on the table had cooled, but its taste lingered. Tomorrow would be a hectic day in court, where all the lies would come to light. But that night I would sleep soundly in my home, the only place that belonged to me. The next morning, I woke up early. I put on an elegant and professional ivory white pantsuit. Today was not a day to be sad, but to fight for justice. Mr. Thompson was already waiting for me in the living room with two burly men, my security guards. With a problem gambler, brother, and debts to the underworld involved, I wasn't going to take any chances. We arrived at the courthouse at 9:45. I expected to find John alone and dejected, but I was met with a staged scene. He was with his mother, Carol, and a disheveled-looking young man with evasive eyes whom I assumed was Steve. They hadn't come to apologize, but to put on a new farce to manipulate me. As soon as she saw me, Carol ran towards me, crying falsely. "Helen, my daughter, forgive me. I was a foolish old woman. Last night I didn't sleep a wink from pure remorse. Because of me, your marriage is breaking up. Withdraw the complaint, please. Come back home with John. I'll go back to my town this very afternoon, and tomorrow I'll put the house in your name." My security guard intervened, preventing her from approaching. John joined the act. "Helen, you see, Mom, an older person, humiliated herself to ask for your forgiveness. She already promised to put the house in your name. What more do you want? A little compassion." Then Steve, the brother, stepped forward arrogantly. "Hello, sister-in-law. I heard you have a spectacular estate in Silverwood Estates. Living alone in such a big house must be boring. I'm going through a rough patch. How about you let me live there for a while? That way, I hide from some problems, and you stay good with the family. That's what family does, right?" His brazenness left me speechless. He was the cause of everything, and now he was asking to live in my grandfather's house. This family's greed knew no bounds. John, seeing my silence, launched his last and most desperate attempt. "Helen, it's true that Steve is being threatened. They're going to cut off his hand if he doesn't pay this week. Do it for me, please. Mortgage the estate, get a few million, and save him. I swear to God I'll pay you back the money by working like a dog my whole life. I couldn't bear it anymore." I took the stack of bank statements from my purse and threw them in his face. "John, look closely. Here are the $50,000 from the joint account you transferred to your brother and the $25,000 from my credit card. In total, $75,000. You brazenly steal from me, and now you ask me to mortgage my grandfather's house to pay your family's gambling debts. You are the most contemptible and shameless man I have ever met." My words resonated in the courthouse lobby. John froze, white as paper. Carol tried to intervene. "Don't slander my son. It's couple's money. He used it for an important family matter. I already told you, I'll compensate you with half the house. Stop that story, Carol. Your apartment is a subsidized housing unit, without a definitive deed and with legal restrictions on its sale or transfer. You have no legal validity to offer me anything. Keep your empty shell." Then, I announced my final decision. I came to file for divorce and sue you, John, for misappropriation. I will recover every last cent of those $75,000. Prepare yourselves for trial. Hearing this, Steve, enraged, lunged at me. "Bitch, you'll see what happens to you." But before he could touch me, my two security guards intercepted him. With a quick and professional movement, one twisted his arm behind his back, immobilizing him, while the other blocked John and Carol. Steve screamed in pain but was completely subdued. "Release him," I ordered. "Don't get your hands dirty." They shoved him towards John, and although he looked at me with hatred, he didn't dare to move further. I turned to my lawyer. "Mr. Thompson, all the evidence is clear. Let's go in and file the complaint." I turned and walked with my head held high, leaving behind that family sinking in panic and despair. The punishment of the law and karma had just begun for those who use feelings as bait for their gain. The curtain had fallen, and I was the author of the end of my own story. 3 months later, the trial concluded. With irrefutable evidence, the court ordered John to return the full $75,000. In addition, the district attorney's office opened a criminal investigation against him for fraud and misappropriation. Karma was swift and relentless. Steve was arrested as part of an illegal betting network and faced a long sentence. To get the money for the judgment and pay lawyers, Carol had to sell her subsidized condo at a ridiculously low price through dubious intermediaries. She lost her treasure and had to return to her hometown in utter disgrace, living in a dilapidated house and facing the mockery of her neighbors. John, after paying me, was left homeless, lost his job, and ended up living in a miserable 100-square-foot room in a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts, a cubicle without air conditioning. Perhaps during those nights of insomnia and sweat, he understood the price of his deception. One autumn morning, I went to court to sign the last papers. I saw John in a corner. He was emaciated, thinner, unshaven, and with a lost look. He signed the divorce agreement with a trembling hand. "Helen, I'm sorry. I'm very regretful. If there were another life, I would work like a slave to compensate you." I took out my own sleek, gold-capped pen and signed with a firm and decisive stroke. No need to wait for another life. In this one, you and your family have already paid your price. From now on, we are strangers. I hope one day you find decency. I stood up and left without looking back. As I crossed the courthouse door, I breathed the air of freedom. I took the draft of our marriage proposal from my bag, crumpled it, and threw it into a trash can. All the trash of the past had been eliminated. My driver opened the car door for me, and we drove away from there. Back at my estate, the aroma of magnolias welcomed me. A woman's life does not have to be a blind sacrifice. Our greatest strength lies in economic independence and the courage to face the truth. The sky is always vast, and my life, from this moment on, would be a blank canvas, bright and free, painted by my own hand. Observing the half-finished canvas in my sunny studio, I felt immense peace. Those who use deception to prosper end up with empty hands and faces covered in shame. Life is clear. A marriage built on lies crumbles. A woman's happiness does not depend on a husband, but on the courage to take the reins and let go of what harms her at the right time. Thank you very much for dedicating your valuable time to listening to today's story. If you found it meaningful, please subscribe to the channel to follow us. Your support is our greatest motivation. We wish you and your family much health, happiness, and peace.